Hey guys, in this video I'll be breaking down the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro, analyzing each of the 8 mandatory poses between the top 4, Derek Lunsford, Nick Walker, Martin Fitzwater, and William Bonac. Now, Derek took the win here with Nick in second place, Martin in third, and Bonac in fourth. But was it the right call? Was Nick robbed? I'll be mainly focusing on the top 2 here, going pose by pose to see who really deserved the victory. Now, before we do dive into it, I want to give a quick shout out to my partner, Old School Labs. If you guys are interested in high quality supplements, you can use my code JakeUltimate or check out the link in the description down below. With that all being said, if you enjoy these videos, a like and sub would be awesome. And without any further ado, let's get into this video. Starting with the front double, it is immediately a battle between Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford. Nick's size is definitely the first thing that jumps out to you. His arms are massive with those insane peaked biceps that completely dominate. The forearms are also very thick, and the grainy condition gives his muscle a dense, rock-hard look. Even more impressive are the quads. They're fuller than ever, with deep cuts and very consistent separation. His waist, while not the smallest as all of us know, is tight enough to maintain a strong V-taper, making his upper body look even more overwhelming. Derek, by comparison, has a much more aesthetic shape. His waist is significantly better thanks to that vacuum, and his lats flare out beautifully, creating a dramatic and very nice and tapered overall look. But as clean as the shape is, there are some discrepancies. His quads are noticeably smaller than we've seen in the past, and the right quad in particular lacks the same sweep and fullness. His arms, though nicely shaped, look a bit underconditioned, especially when standing next to Nick. Now, this pose is quickly becoming a battle between Nick's freak factor and Derek's aesthetic shape. Nick has the size, the grainy condition, and the overwhelming presence. Derek has the tighter midsection, the cleaner lines, but not the same impact in my opinion. For what it's worth, Martin actually looks pretty good here. His quads are full and his structure is solid, but the slight wateriness in his upper body, especially in the arms and the chest, prevents him from truly challenging the top 2, and it almost seems as if he might have missed his peak. Even the quads, when he's not really fully flexed in them, don't appear as good as they normally do. Now, looking at William Bonac, he looks very thick and dense, his biceps are full, and his legs are holding size pretty well considering his age, but his structure makes him appear a bit more compact, and his midsection, while it is controlled, doesn't showcase the same dramatic taper as the rest of the lineup. Now, between Derek and Nick, I would have to give this one to Nick. His combination of massive arms, thicker legs, and superb condition is, I think, too much for Derek to handle. Derek has the lines, but without the same quad size or detail in the arms, he just doesn't match the impact of Nick. Next up is the front lat spread, and this is where the fight between Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford continues to be a clash of two completely different physiques. Derek Lunsford steps into this pose with a far better structure. His waist is tight, and although his lats don't showcase the best, they still flare out pretty well. Even though his legs are not as full as they were at the Arnold, the clean lines of his upper body make this a standout shot in my opinion. His chest is fuller, his shoulders are capped, and his waist remains tight, enhancing that dramatic, sweeping overall look. It's a polished, well-balanced presentation, not the best of all time, not the worst either, and here I think it might be the best, and this makes his physique look really good overall. Now, Nick Walker, on the other hand, takes this pose in a completely different direction. It's never really been the best pose for him, but the one thing that he has, and he has it in spades, has got to be size. And this here is his weapon, and it's on full display. His chest is thick, his shoulders are massive, and his lats have decent width. But unlike Derek, his structure is naturally blockier. Instead of a, sweeping V-taper, Nick's front lat spread is a wall of muscle. It's dense, grainy, and very powerful. And even with all of this, his condition is still excellent, and his improved quad separation and mass adds to the overall impact as well. But for as wide as he is, the lack of shape does give Derek a clear-cut edge in terms of the aesthetic presentation. Between them, this pose is a clear contrast. Derek's clean, classic lines versus Nick's sheer mass and density. Where Derek looks streamlined and balanced, Nick looks overwhelming, but slightly blockier. And this contrast is what makes this comparison so interesting. Derek looks like a statue, while Nick looks like a powerhouse. Now, looking at Martin, it's a solid showing. His lats spread pretty well, and his quads are great, and honestly, he gives both Derek and Nick a run for their money. For William Bonac, the density is definitely there, but you can start to see signs of wear and tear, such as in his wider waist and less aesthetic, sort of melted lines. But between the top two, I would definitely have to go with Derek here. His shape, his cleaner lines, and that dramatic V-taper gives him the edge that Nick's size just cannot overcome. Nick definitely has the density and muscle for days, but in this pose, it's Derek's superior structure and presentation that definitely seal the deal. Onto the side chest, and here Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford go head-to-head with two incredibly strong versions of this pose. Starting with the chest itself, Nick is thick, deeply strided, and very dense. The muscle fibers are visible even from a distance, creating that grainy, granite look that he is known for. Derek's chest, by contrast, is also well-rounded, but he lacks the same fullness and isn't as striated in the far pec. It's a battle of thickness versus shape once again, with Nick looking almost overpowering, while Derek maintains a refined, polished appearance. Looking at the shoulders, Nick's are massive, round, and capped, tying perfectly into his thick upper arms. His triceps are full, adding even more to that sense of mass. Derek is not far behind though. His shoulders are also well developed, and his arms flow cleanly with his great brachialis separation and overall size, creating a nice classic balanced shape. His triceps might not be as thick as Nick's here, but they are sharply separated and match the aesthetic look of his physique. Going to the legs, the difference becomes even clearer. Nick's side leg is simply monstrous, his hamstring drop is thick and deeply separated, and his outer quad sweep adds even more mass, pressing together to create a sense of, just insanity. Now, Derek, on the other hand, has a tighter, more detailed side leg, and the separation overall is very clean, but I would say that he doesn't have that same freakish look as Nick. Now, his midsection stays tight with some really impressive separation and detail, which gives this pose, again, a very nice overall flow. Now, Nick's entire presentation has got to be all about that size and density. From the thick chest to the massive legs, he really does overpower almost everyone else. Derek, meanwhile, presents a cleaner, more refined version with sharper lines and a balanced set of proportions. Martin actually looks pretty good here as well, with a thick chest and massive side leg, but his condition and, overall detail don't seem to be on the same level as the rest of the lineup. Bonac is pretty dense for what it's worth, with a full chest and very strong arms, but I don't really think he's nearly as aesthetic as the top three. Overall, in this pose, I would have to go with Nick Walker, I think. His overwhelming thickness from the chest to the hamstrings is basically impossible to ignore. Derek is clean, sharp, and very balanced, and for some that might make him the perfect choice, but in my opinion, Nick's freak factor and density give him a slight advantage. Now we move on to the rear double, and here the differences between Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford become even more pronounced. Starting with the back itself, this is where Derek Lunsford takes the lead. His upper back is a masterpiece of detail, thick lats that flare wide, nicely separated traps, and a clean, polished look that creates a clear V-taper. His rear delts and delts in general are very full and well defined, and the mid-back showcases excellent separation, giving him a standout look from the top. But once you move beyond the back itself, the momentum shifts entirely to Nick. His arms are massive, those biceps that we saw in the front double are peaking even higher than before, and the triceps are just insane as well. Even from behind, those arms are just insane, maybe even better from how they look in the front, and overall his upper body looks even more complete because of them. Derek's arms, while pretty solid, just don't have that same pop and density and size and freak factor that Nick brings. And then there's the lower body, where Nick is definitely in a league of his own once again. His hamstrings are thick and deeply cut, his adductors are so massive, and the glutes are striated, all adding to the overall sense of thickness and condition. Derek's lower body is clean, but lacks the same impact. The hamstrings might be defined, but they're not as thick, and the glutes are even sharper, but don't have the same pop. This, in my opinion, is where Nick dominates and really pulls ahead. Now, Martin is pretty solid in this pose with a balanced look and a rather impressive, overall separation in his lower body, but he doesn't have the same dry detail as Nick, nor the thickness of Derek. Bonac is thick and dense, but his left lat looks atrophied, creating an uneven appearance. His lower body also lacks the sharp definition in the hamstrings, likely because he isn't flexing them hard enough, even though his condition is pretty dry as we've seen. In the rear double overall, I would have to go with Nick Walker, which might be surprising. Derek obviously has the best back that we've seen in a very long time, but Nick's overall thickness and completeness from the freaky arm development and insane lower body condition and development are just too overwhelming. Martin is balanced but lacks the wow factor in my opinion, mainly because he missed his peak, and Bonac's atrophied lat and softer hamstrings do hold him back a little bit. Next is the rear lat spread, and this one is close, a true test of width, detail, and overall presence. Derek Lunsford's back here immediately grabs my attention like it did in the last pose. His lats flare out wide, creating that very nice V-taper that every bodybuilder aims for. The upper back is crisp and well detailed with sharp, nicely separated traps, and his rear delts create a full rounded look. The clean lines and overall polished separation across the entire back gives his physique a refined appearance, almost like it was carved out of marble. From the waist up, Derek looks like a prime representation of this pose, wide, balanced, and well-conditioned. But then there's Nick Walker. Standing next to Derek, he's all about that raw size. His back spreads out wide, but there's a slight difference here compared to his rear double. His back looks a bit flatter, missing some of that 3D pop. Still, he makes up for it with his sheer thickness. His traps are thick and dense, his rear delts are round, and his lower body is where he really pulls ahead. His hamstrings, like we saw, hang very thick and are deeply corded and cut, and his glutes are also well conditioned, and again the adductors add even more mass that Derek is missing. Even if his back lacks that same V-taper and overall pop as Derek, his lower body screams condition and density. From the top down, it is a contrast between two different approaches. Derek with his clean, wide, and very aesthetic upper back and overall upper body, and Nick with his thick, dense, and very freaky look downstairs. Looking to their sides, Martin Fitzwater presents a very solid and balanced look. His back is decently wide and dense, and his lower body has good separation, but he doesn't have that same thickness in the back as Derek or the sheer size of Nick. It is a respectable shot, but not enough to compete directly with the top two. Bonac looks respectable as well, but his back seems to flatten out, dropping some of that pop and detail. He does look really good overall though, and it is close between him and Martin in my opinion. In this pose though, I would have to give the edge to Derek. His clean shape, dramatic width, and very sharp back detail are just too strong. Nick's lower body is still unmatched, and his thickness is undeniable, but without the same pop in the upper back, he just falls slightly behind. Martin is very balanced, but, he lacks that wow factor, mainly because, like in all the other poses, he kind of looks a little bit off, and Bonac's uneven lats and lesser detail do hold him back ever so slightly. Now, onto the side triceps, and this is where Nick Walker's dense, freaky look takes center stage. Nick's triceps are thick, strided, and carry that 3D look that instantly draws the eye. The muscle bellies are full with sharp cuts that run through them, and the overall density is undeniable. His chest is also very full, his shoulders are capped perfectly, and his waist is tight, giving him a balanced yet very freaky look. But the real standout has got to be that side leg. It's thick, deeply separated, and perfectly detailed in my opinion, adding to the overall impact of the overall shot. This is easily one of his strongest poses. From that midsection, the tricep, and the side leg, everything just flows. On the other hand, Derek takes a kind of different approach. His triceps are obviously clean and sharply separated, and while they aren't as thick as Nick's, they have a crisp, very aesthetic shape. His chest is full, his waist is tight and controlled, and his side leg shows even deeper separation and maybe more visible cuts. What makes Derek so strong here, though, has got to be his balance. Nothing looks overly dominant or lacking, and his shape remains very polished. It's a clean, classic variation of the pose with just enough mass to keep it very competitive. Side by side, it is definitely a contrast between freak factor and clean aesthetics. Nick's sheer density is impossible to ignore, while Derek brings a more balanced, almost streamlined look. I will say though that Nick's midsection almost looks better than Derek's, however, I might say that Derek's proportions look a bit better. Now, Martin Fitzwater shows solid thickness in his tricep, but his midsection is a bit of a distraction. His abs protrude slightly, which takes away from the clean, streamlined look that both Nick and Derek bring. His condition is good, but without the same control in the waist, it is a step behind. Bonak also looks good overall, and his triceps are well developed, but his waist looks a bit blocky, and I actually prefer his other variation of the pose, the one where he kicks his calf back. He's still undeniably impressive, but this setup doesn't really showcase him at his best in my opinion. In the side triceps overall, I would have to give the win to Nick. He is really dense with that great tricep, the very thick lower body, and obviously a really tight and controlled waist, and the condition really just puts it over the edge. Now, Derek looks great as well, with clean lines and a tight midsection, but he just doesn't have that same freak factor and wow factor in the areas that matter. Martin is obviously held back by that midsection, but looks pretty solid nonetheless, and Bonak is powerful, but looks slightly blocky, and definitely a little bit behind. Moving on to the ab and thigh, this is where Nick Walker's improvements definitely become crystal clear. Nick's waist is surprisingly tight, especially for someone his size. His abs may not have the cleanest shape, but they show solid, deep separation and very clear definition. But what really steals the show are his quads. They're thick, deeply separated, and dramatically improved compared to his past showings. The muscle bellies are full, and the cuts are very sharp and detailed, giving him a dominant look from the waist down. It's a mix of mass and detail that makes this version very nice. Now, I would say Derek might have the tightest midsection of the group, creating a very clean and tapered look. His abs are genetically very well inserted and gifted, however, they've never really been the most defined. They don't look bad here by any means, but they could certainly have been a lot better. Moreover, his quads are pretty well defined, but they do lack the same thickness and size that the other three bring. Still, the overall shape of his abs and the symmetry of the physique gives him a more classic, streamlined look. Derek's strength here is definitely his shape and tightness, but the lack of quad size does hold him back in my opinion. Looking side by side, it's definitely another close one. Nick has that powerful, thick look, while Derek is clean and balanced. Nick's improvements in the quad thickness and his surprisingly tight midsection give him a real advantage, while Derek's clean lines keep him pretty competitive. Martin actually looks very good here once again. His quads are sharply separated with very clear feathering when he locks out that quad, and his midsection is tight, showcasing visible, almost bubbly abs. The shape is overall very clean, and his structure works very well, making this one of his better shots. In terms of the overall package, he might even beat out Derek and Nick. William Bonak is also solid. His abs are sharp with noticeable serratus detail along the sides, and his quads still have really good separation, I'd say. That said, the overall shape is not as dramatic, and while his density is very impressive, the flow doesn't match a guy like Martin or Derek. He also covers some of his midsection with his hand, which might penalize him in the eyes of the judges. In the abs and thigh, I would definitely say it is close. I could see you going with Nick, Martin, or Derek. All of them look really good. If I had to choose out of all of them who I would go with, I would probably take Martin here, but between Nick and Derek, it is close like I said, so I would probably choose Nick actually. I think that Nick has the best combination of thick, separated quads, a surprisingly tight waist, and overall great condition as well. Derek does have that really good shape and a very clean waist, but his quads just don't have the same sweep, and they are a part of the pose. I mean, abs and thigh, how can you win if you don't have really good thighs? Now, Martin is also impressive, as I said, and I would prefer him, but between the top two, that's how it would go. Finally, we've got the most muscular, and this is where Nick really does seal the deal in my opinion. Nick is an absolute monster. His shoulders are massive and round like cannonballs, his chest looks like it's really full, and his arms are thick and really dense. And just, those biceps again, the triceps, everything flows really nicely. Even his quads are thick and deeply cut, and every inch of his physique just screams size and density. No matter which variation he hits, he simply overwhelms everyone else. Derek Lunsford looks pretty clean and balanced like he did in every other pose, but this is definitely not a pose where you want to look like that. His waist is tight, his chest is pretty good, and his quads show solid separation, but he doesn't have that same thickness in the arms, shoulders, or chest as Nick. His shape is clean, like I said, but he lacks that pure mass and detail that keeps him just a step behind Nick Walker, in my opinion. Personally, I think Martin actually looks really awesome. His chest is very thick and deeply cut, and his shoulders are full, his quads are sharp, and everything looks amazing for him. There is a graininess to his look, and it adds a freaky, almost 90s aesthetic. He may not be as big as Nick, but his, dense, very detailed look keeps him in the mix. Bonac has his trademark thick and round bubbliness, with very full arms and a dense strided chest. His quads still show very great separation, and his upper body is full and powerful. He is super impressive, and he definitely gives everyone a run for their money. Overall, though, in this final pose, I would have Nick Walker running away with it. His sheer size, thickness, and freak factor are simply too much. But it is a close battle between the other three. Derek looks pretty good, Martin is grainy and dense, and Bonac is thick and powerful. If anything though, Derek might even be last here, as both Martin and Bonac showcase way more detail. It could go either way between all of them, but I would definitely say that none of them can touch Nick. So in the end, looking at all the mandatories, I had Nick Walker winning more poses than Derek. For me, that means that this might just have been a robbery. While it is true that Nick struggled a bit with his waist control, and the gap between the two was definitely closed at the finals, I still think that Nick, took more of the poses overall. But to be fair, I wasn't there in person, and maybe it looked completely different there, but that's just my opinion on the entire competition. Do let me know down below in the comments your thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. With that all being said, I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.